storyboards. So thank you for joining us. We should have probably, I believe, another 15 people or so joining us. So while we do that, I'm just going to start, while people join us, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping items that are just tradition for the start of all of our calls to settle us all in the same place. But happy day. I was going to say day because I couldn't remember what day it is. So it's happy Tuesday. And we hope you are all doing really, really well. All right, y'all, you know what we're going to do here. While we get people joining us, we just ask that you take a moment to rename yourselves, because part of our agenda today, which we'll go over in a second, is going to be storyboards as well as some team time to allow you to work on, to give you some time to think, process, and work on your 30, 60, 90-day action plans. So with that, please go ahead and find yourself on the participant list. So you're going to click participant at the bottom of your screen, the bottom line of your panel. And you are going to click more right next to your name. And you will rename yourself with your agency name in front. So, New Bedford or Square One or any of the agencies, your agency name first and then your name. And this will allow Anna to make sure you get to the right room for storyboards, and then you get to the right room for your team time. So just take a minute to do that so we can all start ready and easily be able to get into the various rooms. And I'm gonna just, while we wait for others to join us, because we don't want to start storyboard session with at least the majority of the people that we expect today, we wanted to check in with you. We know that a lot of information has been shared, and we know that you have had to absorb a lot and that you're doing a lot and that you're trying these different strategies and that doing this work is hard. So I'm going to ask Anna to pull up our poll, and we wanted to check in. And the question is, we hope, simple, but what is your comfort level in using universal education strategies with families? And we kept the responses relatively simple, not at all comfortable, somewhat comfortable, or very comfortable. And the reason we are asking is because this will inform our faculty, give us a bit of a pulse check on how you're feeling and where we need to invest some additional time. It doesn't mean that if we get everybody saying very comfortable that we're not revisiting. There are many more details and things that we need to think about in situations that we will be working through together. But nice to get a pulse check to see how you're feeling. And let's leave this poll open just a little longer because we have about 11 of the 19 people on the line. Recognizing that our awardees are probably not going to answer, although we welcome you to. As people come on in, go ahead and let us know, what is your comfort level in using universal education strategies with families? We know many of you have invested a lot of efforts in getting comfortable and role playing with each other and making sure that you feel good about the words, about the plan, about what it entails. All right, so I'm seeing a little more than half of you, about 60% of you saying somewhat comfortable. And then about almost 40% of you saying very comfortable. So thank you for sharing. And that's about 13 out of the 21. So I'm going to do another call. This is anonymous, so please feel free to be honest. This is truly a place for just a pulse check to see what we bring to you. And then I'm going to ask, we're going to do the same, except this time I'm going to ask you about your level of comfort with safer planning strategies. How comfortable do you feel using the safer planning strategies we discussed with families? So again, not at all comfortable, somewhat comfortable, and very comfortable. All right, it looks like we have about something similar at a 62-38%. And we know that so far we've only covered really the initial introduction of both of these really important interventions. So that makes good sense. So thank you for answering. And then I'm going to do another call for people to, I'm going to go back. And since we have a number of people who just joined us, I'm going to do another call of an ask to please look at yourself on the participant list. So pull the participant list at the bottom of your panel of your Zoom screen. And you're going to go find your name. You're going to hit more. You're going to rename yourself. And we ask that you please rename yourself with your agency names in front of your name. So agency name and then your name. Just like here, EDC, Olivia. All right, so it looks like we have about the number of people. We're still missing a few. So Anna, you'll have to help our colleagues as they join in, but we're gonna be moving over to our storyboard session. And during this storyboard session, we asked each of your teams to identify a speaker. You have about 3 to 5 minutes to share your most successful change. And this is really the place where you already have your slides. We have them pulled up for you. So only focusing on the successful change, not the process map. So these are the teams. We're going to be sent into various groups and you'll have an opportunity, 3 to 5 minutes, to share your most successful change. So I'm going to just check in with Anna and she's going to move us into our respective breakout groups. And then we have our leads who have your slides pulled up. Okay. So go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say a lot of people are going to need to be placed. So if it's possible, just either put your agency in the chat and then I can get you there faster.
Perfect. So if you have not been able to change your name to tell us what your what agency you are with, please go ahead and tell us in the chat box, and that way Anna is able to help you. See, I'm just gonna check in because we have probably what I would predict will be your favorite thing of the last 4 days, which is to hear from a colleague of yours from Minnesota, a member of one of the LIAs who participated in the first iteration of the Intimate Partner Violence Coin. And I'm searching for Trisha.
I'm here.
Okay. Trisha, I'm going to share my screen and you can I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. Thanks, Dee. Well, as you said, we're very excited to welcome Kathy Bloomquist. Kathy is an NFP program supervisor in Ramsey County. And Kathy, as he said, led one of our teams during our first round of the IPV coin. And her team really did incredible work. And many of the PDSAs actually in the playbook that you guys are using are from their team. So we thought it'd be great if Kathy could come and share a little bit about their team's journey in the coin, some of their big aha moments, and how this work really shifted their practice. So Kathy, welcome, and I will turn it over to you. Z is going to advance your slides.
Thank you. I guess that's my part. Hi to all of you, and I am just so grateful to have the chance to be here and talk with you about some of the things we learned. This slide, I have to tell you, was not labeled by me. I never in a million years would have put that superstar label on what we did. We felt like we were such beginners in CQI, and really by the end maybe felt like we were toddlers. We had plenty of meltdowns and lots of messes and things that happen with toddlers. So not at all superstars. So that was someone else's kind words for us. And this was our group that we started with. It really ended up to be primarily Sharon and I in the center in the dark jackets, and one NFP nurse on Sharon's side and an HFA nurse also. So our group started out a little bit too big, and you know, then evolved. But we also had a group of HFA nurses and a group of NFP nurses who were our testers. So we had a group of about 10 who were really the nurses who did the thinking and the learning. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be here is that I really feel like the year and a half plus that we had our HV Coin project was probably some of the deepest, richest learning I've ever had, and hardest learning also. And I think you all have an even harder task to be doing this all during the pandemic. We started out when we wouldn't have even been able to imagine what was coming. So, and then had to kind of adapt. But I think to do this project entirely in the pandemic year, I just commend you all for all that you are doing. Next, see. I'm going to try to be succinct because I know that these sessions are so super packed. But I'm going to talk, I mostly am going to talk about the things that we learned more than the structure of the PDSAs. I don't know that we ever totally figured out the data. We had one nurse who, that was her specialty. That we did our very best, but that was a part that was hardest for our brains, I think. But we loved the PDSAs and trying things and then writing very long and elaborate descriptions of what we learned that Trisha and Z have kindly made much more succinct for you all. But in thinking about universal education, I think, I know that's something that you all have already had sessions about. And that was probably one of the biggest ahas for us. Both of our models, HFA and NFP, have some, guidelines around screening. And we were just shocked, but not shocked, I guess, to find that when we shifted to talking more about healthy relationships and having conversations about that, even many clients who might have screened negative on IPV screens were sharing and disclosing their experiences. And we did use, so that was really one of our biggest learnings, that we had just such interesting and really even more helpful conversations than the ones that came from the screening tools. And then our hope was that having those conversations early in our relationships with clients would help the screenings that were part of our models make more sense. And it would be clear to our clients that, like, this is a thing we can talk about, and it really is universal. Everyone has relationships on a range of healthy to unhealthy. And next, please. So we can maybe go next through this one too. We used the Futures Without Violence cards to introduce the topic, and then just looked at the comfort of the nurses and anything that maybe surprised them or felt uncomfortable during the discussion. You can go to the next one too, please. And so this was really what was so interesting to see, that these are just a couple of examples, but clients would talk much more comfortably when we were talking about healthy relationships, using the cards, about other people in their family or networks relationships, and sometimes about their own. And we had a significantly higher number of disclosures of IPV from that conversational approach. And there were discomforts too, that it wasn't always easy. There were some barriers. Next, please. There were some challenges, how to measure it. We have in St. Paul, Ramsey County, where I work, we're the smallest but densest and most diverse county in Minnesota, which you may not think of as a super diverse place, but we have a huge number of refugees in the St. Paul area from a number of places, particularly most recently from Burma, Myanmar. That's Karen speaking, and Karenni and Burmese speaking refugees. So trying to adapt to doing those conversations through interpreters was sometimes challenging. We learned a lot from interpreters and a lot from our families, and had a number of PDSAs that were around other ways of talking about healthy relationships. And then I love this line that Z and Trisha added in, that then COVID struck. So we had to rethink everything. No longer could we be doing that on our virtual visits once we even figured out how to do our virtual visits. And so we shifted to, there was a pause in our HV Coin project for a few months, the summer that COVID struck, and then we had an extension and resumed in the fall, and had such helpful learning about how to pivot and still talk about healthy relationships, but in a way that would feel safe, when we wouldn't always know who was next to the client on the screen or who was in the room. And so what we did was, with the guidance of the wonderful faculty, was to try some different things. And so we tried using some conversation prompts. The most effective ones were talking about supports. And so we would weave it into other home visiting topics, maybe talking about, plans for labor and delivery, or breastfeeding, or a child who's newly mobile, like developmental changes of the child, or depending on where the family was at in our program. And we would just ask, just weave into the regular conversation. How does your partner support you with this? Or what does your partner think about discipline? Or just as a way to open up the topic of relationships in a way that felt safe. And if our clients were comfortable talking or sharing more, they could, and also they could still know that that how things are in their family, in their relationships, was important to us. And another way that we would weave healthy relationship conversations into the conversation during our COVID virtual visits was to talk about the stress of COVID, and how is this for your family? How is your family handling the stress of COVID? And that could be a pretty innocuous question, or it could be an opening to talking about the impact of increased stress, because we were super worried, as I'm sure you all are as well, about what is going on for our families, that when there was so much more isolation and so much stress. And we know that the rates of IPV were increasing, but we wanted it still to be able to be a topic. So we practiced and had some PDSAs that were around just listening differently, and using those prompts. And then the other thing we did differently, because we didn't feel like it was safe to hand out the cards we'd been using before. I know there have been some adapted through the pandemic, and we didn't have all of those in the beginning, but we would just share we had some more tests we did where we practiced just sharing with clients the 211 United Way first call for help number. And I don't know if that's true in all communities, but it was like a one number where you could call and get information about food support, about financial resources, about housing crises, and also about shelters and advocacy programs. So it was a more normalized way to give a resource than to say, here's the number for the local shelter. Next, please. And then the other area that we worked on that we just loved thinking about, because it was, again, just felt, I think we had all thought safety planning when we started in the HV coin. Safety planning was like a paper you worked on, like a product, like we were going to get a safety plan we could give to our clients somehow safely. And the idea that it also was woven into the relationship with families and was more of an ongoing thing, and really much more led by our clients, was so helpful. And so this quote from one of the nurses was about how it was a shift in thinking, and the 3 conversation starters to first just empathetically respond to whatever the client has disclosed or shared, or even the checking back about a situation we knew about, that empathetic validation. The second part, what worries you most? And the third question, how can I be helpful? And some of the nurses felt a little uncomfortable about the how can I be helpful, because they thought they felt very humble, I think, about how they could be helpful in this. So they felt more comfortable. We even tested that out. They felt more comfortable saying, what might be helpful? What do you think might be helpful to you? And as this quote says, it might seem obvious, but just thinking of those questions and finding ways to ask them of themselves as well, so that they could know and notice and not ignore, but sort of set to the side their own worries and their own questions about how can I possibly be helpful in this, to be able to really, again, listen differently to their clients. Next, please. So this is just an example of the PDSA, and one of them that we, with the conversation starter tips. When we were in person, I had a whole wall of our process map and the conversation starter tips, and I had giant Post-its on my wall that the people who sat with me for reflective supervision weren't seeing, but I was seeing. And sometimes just before they would come to meet with me, just even to look at those again would be grounding for me. So now I have to have like just little tiny Post-its to take that place. But next, please. So this is an example of one of the just interesting examples. And when I was doing the PDSAs, it may have driven Tricia crazy. She never said that. She was always so kind and appreciative, but I would have long sort of narratives and of what I learned, just because I wanted to capture it somewhere and be able to come back to it and think about it. And I'm thinking you may have had the chance to see the washing machine animated video, but we were just quite enchanted by that and just loved it, and thought about it and talked about it a lot among ourselves about all the things we want for our clients and the polls that we have, and how super, super hard it is to set those aside and really ask about what the client's biggest worry is and what she's needing. And in our program, I'm sure as in yours, we really, really wish we could give our clients washing machines. Instead, it's things like, maybe occasionally diapers if we have them in stock, or, an O-ball for the baby for developmental, before we're doing developmental testing. So we don't have big things to give them, but it, like that metaphor of really going where the client wants to go, was this particular PDSA was an example of that. The nurse had a client in a very scary IPV situation, and there had been another incident, and it was very stirring to the nurse and just very painful to hear this client talking about it. And she just wanted to get, she felt like now the client is ready, going to be ready for a shelter, certainly, because this is so awful. We've got to get her out of there. But the client was also disclosing an unplanned new pregnancy with her abuser, and the nurse just really had to work so hard to set aside her own fears. She really was fearful for this client's life, and when she asked those questions about what are you most worried about, and she's thinking, to herself, I'm worried that you're not going to survive this. The client was worried about the pregnancy and what she would do about it, and couldn't talk about anything else until they went there. And so they spent time on the visit talking about her options, talking about her health care, and calling to make an appointment with her prenatal provider to talk through what next. And then after that, the client could talk about how to stay safe and what might be some next steps for her for safety. Next, please. And then I'm not sure how I'm doing with time, but I hope I'm doing okay. I'm trying to be fast, but I'll keep going. And then if there's questions or more that you want me to talk about, I'd be glad to. And then Tricia and Z had asked me to talk a little bit about our relationships with DV partners as well. And that was in all the drivers that we worked on. We felt just really inept about that one. We just felt like that was one we hadn't done. And so it was kind of ironic when they asked what I could say about that, because I felt like we had just been like big flops in CQI with this driver. Some of the other people that were in our cohort had just these amazing, impressive plans. They had meetings with their DV partners. They set goals together, and we spent most of that year and a half even just figuring out who they were, which might sound crazy, but we're a very, as I said, densely populated city, and there's tons and tons of different shelters and programs. There's some that are language specific. There's a one that focuses on working with Latina moms. There's another one that's called Asian Women United. That was really the main place that our Karen speaking clients would go. There were multiple other kind of group specific shelters. We didn't even know in the beginning the place that we were going to get orders for protection. We thought it was an agency, and then we learned after all these years, 12 years of referring clients there, that it was actually a coalition of staff that were loaned from many different DV agencies. So we spent the whole year, even just year and a half, figuring out the lay of the land. And at one point we had a panel presentation where we figured out how to work with just a couple of the DV partners, and we had a statewide violence prevention coalition or initiative, Violence Free Minnesota it's called now. And that person was just a gem to connect with. We did a lot of field trips. People on the from the larger HV Coin team that you had the picture of, we kind of divided up different agencies and just made a field trip and a personal connection, and just went as people, as public health nurses in the community who referred to them but really didn't know how they worked. And we found they actually didn't talk a lot with each other either, but we connected with two main ones that made all the difference in the world in our project. And so they came and did trainings about their resources and about DV with our clients, or with our staff, because we have about 70 home visitors in our agency. We're a really big agency. And so they did a training that was just before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, because we had this beginning relationship with the two in particular that we had done field trips to and had done trainings for us, it ended up that we called them and we would ask them, what's going on in the IPV world? Are shelters open? Are you seeing more? Are you getting more calls to your crisis lines? And then we could share that information with our nurses, because we had to just abruptly stop doing our IPV screens. People were super worried about how families were coping. We hadn't yet figured out some of the workarounds and other ways of still talking about healthy relationships. And so it was really reassuring to draw on our community partners and get information from them and share that with all of our whole staff. And then at some point we had them come and do a virtual update for us. And then what was really surprising was at one point the agency that was the coordinator of the court process for getting orders for protection, it's called St. Paul Intervention Project. They don't have a shelter, but they have advocacy, and they're kind of a hub. And we had finally figured out that they were the ones, not the place that at the courthouse that we kept calling and no one would answer. So we figured out all this stuff and shared it with the wider staff. But they actually reached out to us, the director, and because we were public health, and said, we are starting to open up the courts again for orders for protection, but we don't know if our environment is safe. Do you have anybody who could come over and walk through? And that was, when everything was so new and we were so scared, like how could we do anything in person? So we reached out to our medical director, who is very down to earth and so open, so eager to work with community partners. And she said, well, I'd love to go over and I'll walk through their space and we'll figure out where they need to maybe have plexiglass, or where do they need to have sanitizer, and is it safe enough to let survivors and any other people who are needing to come and meet one-to-one with an advocate. So we were really excited that they needed us for something and that we could be of use to them as well. So I would just say, if any of you, I would guess you are all miles beyond where we were with our partners, because we really ended the project thinking, okay, that's a driver. We were hardly able to make a dent. But it does really take time, and as everything is, it really is about relationships, and relationships do take time, and they're mutual, and they did really blossom in the pandemic. And we continue to reach out. Not, we never had the wonderful meetings that we envied from some of our cohort teams, but we know who they are, and we know how to, we know a little more about what the experience is for our clients if they're calling, and we know who at which shelter has great legal resources that we can reach out to and on clients' behalf, and all those kind of things. So that is in a nutshell things that we learned. There were a million more, it seems like, but thank you for moving it ahead. Yeah, I think I think these are just some quotes at the end that some of the team members were reflecting on understanding more about the challenges and complexities with systems, things we thought were connected and that really weren't. And it's not an easy system, at least in our community, for clients to use in a time of crisis. And sometimes we would support a mom in finally making the call about a shelter, and they would be full, and then that would be discouraging. And so I think the work with our partners helped us to be able to at least explain the system a little bit better to clients and help a little bit with navigating it, and to encourage them to reach out sooner, that they could talk with an advocate even if they weren't at a place where they were ready to leave. I think before this project, we had the idea that the answer to IPV was leave ASAP and get somewhere safe. And it just is so much more complicated than that. And we knew that, but I think we were thinking we'll get the answer for how to get our moms to leave and be safe. And of course, it's so much more complicated. And I think the writing, the article about that I think might have come from Lee and from Washington about the moms the reasons that moms stay in relationship and need was super helpful too, because we just wanted to be better at meeting our clients where they are and understanding our own fears and our own agenda and how that can drive things in a way that isn't in the best service of our clients.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I think if we were all in person, there would be a whole lot of clapping you could hear right now, because that was so rich, so wonderful, so vulnerable on behalf of your program, and we really appreciate it. I'd love to just see what your colleagues across the 2 states that are here, Oregon and Massachusetts, any questions, any reactions? You're getting a standing ovation from the faculty.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to hug the faculty. Thank you. Really, I feel we feel like you've been with us through even this time that we've not been doing the project.
So I'm gonna hold some silence here, see if anybody has any reactions or questions for Kathy in these last couple of minutes.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Hi, Faduma.
So hi. My question is more about cultural and language adaptation, because I was looking at the slide, and we're also doing this very similar testing, but I don't know. I just wanted to know, how did it go with including other cultures? Like, what will you say will work? Because still we are not very successful with including other cultures because of I think beliefs about IPV, and some people believe, like, if you share, you may lose your kids, so you just keep it yourself. So things like that. But I just wanted you add maybe will you advise us to steps we can take that will increase that?
I definitely don't have the answers about that. That I think was one of our greatest challenges too. And I think we just, but I think this approach of doing little tests and trying things is really the way into figuring that out. And one of the things we had wanted to do that we didn't get to finish, and we certainly still are hoping to do it, but was to find some cultural guides from some of the communities we work with a lot, to try to understand a little better even what questions would be helpful, because certainly the questions on our formal screens were not they just really did not translate to our non-English speaking clients. But I think actually the things that we tried during virtual visits were we heard from some of the interpreters were more helpful, like if the questions were, but again, it all depends on safety and if it's safe enough to ask things even virtually, but about how your partner helps you. What kinds of things does your partner help you with? That was one question that worked with some of our non-English speakers. And we really, I think the best learning was from clients we could talk with safely, to ask them what questions help, or to ask interpreters that we trusted and worked with a lot as well. But in our virtual world, we were mostly using a language line that was just whatever interpreters we could get initially. So then we didn't even have the interpreter relationship that we usually have in our long-term home visiting. So I'm sorry, I don't really have great answers, but it did seem like the cards that were simpler, there was one Futures Without Violence safety card that was Women Are Sacred. That was one that we really liked, because it had not quite as many words to translate. The interpreters found it really hard to translate the cards, so the simpler the better. And I think it's a work in progress for us, absolutely. But trying to learn from the communities was the best approach.
And I suspect the faculty and your colleagues would be nodding to that. And I believe that Lee might have something to add here. Lee, if in this last minute before we have to transition.
Sure, I can't see myself, but that's not an issue. I don't know what the view is, but was it Fatima who asked the question?
Yes.
Yes. So Fatima, I think that's a really excellent question. And I would say that to go back to like what Kathy was saying just a few minutes ago, is because you're doing things when you can talk to folks and put things in your own words and in your own language, and really just focusing on your version of like what keeps you up at night, what worries you most, to figure out the survivor's priorities, and setting aside right now, especially if you're still meeting virtually, the formal screening, the formal card, until you have that relationship built up. Because, you know, to be able to, and I don't know what your state is, your state laws are around mandatory reporting, but like in Washington state, the fact that domestic violence is happening is not a mandatory report. So to just to be able to reassure a family, you know, what we share is confidential. In our state, you know, the fact that you're having a hard time in your relationship is not something we're going to be talking to people about. But if you can't do that because it's virtual, to just really leaning into those simple questions that are really powerful. What are you most worried about? What can I help you with now? You know, because you're trying to help folks, of course, before they're stripped of their resources. And, you know, most of the families you're working with want to be together. They're not interested, you know, and as an advocate, same thing. You know, most of the people I was working with are not in immediate crisis. So how do you make things better at home? And that really matters. So, you know, it might be like, help me get him a job, or it might be, I need help with, you know, just something you don't expect, as we said in used in the washing machine video. So you all are the best navigators of what works in your community. So just going back to some of those, the simpler, but actually could open up a conversation into a richer conversation, I think works best, would probably work best as a starting point.
Thank you both. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy, for your time, for your willingness to be here, for your willingness to share your learning journey. I'm going to encourage everyone to put in, I know sometimes when you hear a lot of really wonderful things, you need time to process, so put your questions in the chat box, but we'll move forward to our break so everybody has a moment to stretch and think, and perhaps when you come back, you have more. So a big thank you, Kathy, and hello to all of your colleagues and team. We'll take a 5-minute break and return back around 103, so where we'll start our 30, 60, 90-day action plan. And then during the break, you want to put your questions into the chat box. Feel free to start, our faculty can capture it. And I know that Kathy needs to take her time to continue to do her work, but if any are specific for her, I know that we can contact her, if that's okay, Kathy, to get some of your insights.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And I just really do wish you well, and wish I could sneak back into this project.
You're always welcome.
So thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Hey, Kathy, before you
Yes.
leave, this is Lee, because I know you're
Yes.
leaving. I'd love to know, even offline at some point, what do you think was 1 or 2 things that you think really helped your team move past their fears, give up their fears? You can answer it another time. I just think that like that's really, that place is a really challenging place to reach, and it's fabulous that you all did. So I'd love to hear more about that another time. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and in a super nutshell, it would just be the washing machine metaphor really was huge, and reflective supervision together, learning together and reflective supervision, I would say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy.
All right, we'll do our break till 1:05. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Z. It was just a joy to hear your voices again.
Okay, Kathy, are you still, did she leave? Are you still
I
there?
am, Lee. Yes, I am.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
I know my view is just like you only, so you're my big screen.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the break time and you in a little box. So I'm sorry you have me so big.
That's right. I'm glad you can see me. I would like to know, though, too, even when reflective supervision, sometime a little more about that, because just because you do it, you know, when you have IPV involved, a supervisor can still say, well, we need to do everything we can do to get them out of there, you know. So I just know more about like how you helped get your folks like what about IPV and that reflective supervision did the supervisors themselves have to like integrate or change their own
Right.
thinking about?
Yeah, that's, I think that's where this project was it was so helpful for me as a supervisor, because I think I think before this project, I would hear about IPV and I would be with the nurses wherever they were and like this, yes, this is so awful. Oh, this is so hard, and all of those things that it is. But it gave, you're helping me think of what I haven't really put into words, but it gave me some different tools to come back to even come back to not everyone I supervised was at the learning sessions. So we tried to share as much of that as we could, but I could do things like try to come back to the conversation starter questions for safer planning, even in my conversations with the nurses. What are you most worried about? What,
I see.
and so it was like a parallel process, I guess, that
Excellent.
I could try those things with
Excellent.
the nurses, hoping they would try them with their clients. But it wasn't always, that's why it was really messy, and it wasn't always that, wasn't always that, wasn't always
That's awesome.
It was more bumbling some of the time, but I had something to draw on that I didn't really have before. And I think that they did as well as in their direct practice.
That's great. Okay, that's good to know. That's useful that way, and that it was actually a useful tool for those.
Oh, very much
okay.
so. Very much so. And because if they didn't, if I couldn't figure out what am I worried about, I would just be joining the nurses. Like I had to know my worries and kind of think through, what do I need to set aside to be with this nurse? And what does she need to set aside? Not ignore, but just be aware of, so she can listen differently. And
I love that you're saying listen differently.
Oh,
too.
it got to be part of our vocabulary. I wasn't saying that before. That's totally stolen.
Oh, that's so
Since
cool.
we had permission
so cool.
to steal shamelessly.
Oh yeah, please steal.
Like the first couple.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's me. I'm sorry. It's hard when it's not gallery.
I know we can't see you, gallery
so
view.
You can't, I can't flag people down and say, wait.
Yeah.
So
there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can. Yeah, I can.
Okay. So because you've done so much work, we have a new version of the card that's much more simple, and we are looking for folks to test it. And if you and your staff, we're paying a $25 stipend for staff to do a little focus group to help us make sure that we got it. And if your staff would be interested, I would be so honored to. So much work. And I really think, also sort of bringing in the lens around interpretation and all those other things, it would melt me if you might be interested.
We would love to do that. We don't need the stipend. We would just be happy to test it. That's kind of you to offer. But yeah, we worked a lot with Maggie Royer from the Minnesota Violence Free Minnesota, I think is their new name. And the cards that I didn't mention this in the larger group because I didn't know how available they were widely, but the cards that were in the Karen language that I believe they worked on, they're safety cards with the same information, but they're translated into Karen, and they have a beautiful drawing on the text. Let's see. I don't know if you can see.
And Kathy, I'm about to get in trouble because I think we're supposed to.
Okay.
Talking, but let's put a pin in this and talk offline. But
absolutely,
I really want to hear more about what you've been doing, and
we'd love to test the new.
So inspired by what you had to say. You absolutely made my month, week, and year.
Oh, so thank you, Rebecca.
Really beautiful work.
Thank you so much. We'll talk. I'd love to talk anytime.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you. Oh, yay. Thank you, Lee. Take care. Thank you both.
right, hi everyone. I have 1:05, so I'm going to ask everyone to come back. I hope you were able to take a couple minutes and grab some water or a snack. But we are going to jump into the next part of our day, which is planning your work for the next 90 days. So, we know that achieving our aim for this work is going to require work across all of our 4 primary drivers. And now that you've gotten some grounding in each of them, we want you to think through how you're actually going to work across all of the drivers by the end of our work together. And one way to do that is to really break down the work into chunks and focus on the next 90 days. So during this next session, we want you to start to map out your team's work between now and our next learning session in September, and then develop a plan for which drivers you're going to focus on. So you're each going to move into your a breakout room with your team. And you're going to talk as a team about which drivers you want to focus on between now and September. And you'll notice that this does say drivers. So, while many of you started with one driver, it's important that you start to work through some of the other drivers so that you are on pace to achieve the aims by the end of the work. And to help you think about, which drivers you do want to focus on, we recommend you review your process maps that you completed for pre-work and your run charts on your dashboard. And think about these questions that you see on the screen. What are we currently testing that is resulting in improvement? What might we need to keep testing and learn a little bit more about? And what measures or steps in our process map still have room for improvement? So you're going to talk as a team about which drivers to focus on. And then for each of those drivers, you'll identify which changes are needed for your team to get that driver in place. And then you'll begin to map out PDSAs to test those changes and really make a plan for what PDSAs you're going to run, who's going to be responsible, and when you're going to test them. And you're going to create this plan through September, and then at that point you're gonna, we'll have time to reassess again, look at what you've accomplished and where else you might need to work. And you're gonna start this work in this next session, but it's likely gonna have to continue after the learning session. We do ask that you email your completed form. I'm gonna bring that up in a minute to show you, to both your CQI lead and the HV Coin team by July 12th. And even though you're sending us your form and your plan, we really do hope that this is a living document and something that you're going to continue to come back to during team meetings or huddles to help your team really manage the work and stay on track. As you work on your plan, definitely draw on those skills and the content that you've heard over these last 4 days. So we've mentioned, using your process map and your run charts to identify areas for improvement. Some of you went to the data session, so think about how to look at your run charts for learning. Some of you went to the root cause session and started thinking about your steps in your process that need improvement. Use those tools to help you identify changes that will be most effective. Faculty and peers shared a lot of great content over the last 4 days. So, think about those changes as you plan. And then, of course, remember the playbook and the example or gold standard PDSA that can serve as great templates. So we're going to look at an example of how you might go about this. So we have a tool that you can use to help you map out your work. Going to, oh, is my video not on? Sorry, guys, thought I was on video. All right, can you guys see the Excel now? Okay, great. So you should have all got an email with the 90-day planning form, and the Excel spreadsheet has each of the primary drivers.
Trisha, can you make it bigger? Is that possible? I'm sorry. I know no one can, I'm assuming nobody can read it. So I just want to say it out loud for our friends.
Yeah. I'm zooming. Is that helping or no?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Helping.
Okay. So the spreadsheet has each of the 4 primary drivers. Column B has all of the change ideas associated with the driver. And then this next column here is where you'll write in what PDSAs you might want to run, so what ideas you're actually going to test. You'll put in the person who's going to be responsible for that change, and then when you're going to actually test it over the next, again, we'll plan for 90 days. So let's look at an example of sort of how you might have a discussion with your team. So one thing we said was to maybe look at your process map. So, this is an example of a process map with the data that you guys tie to it as part of pre-work. And so if, this was my team, I might look at my process map and say, okay, which steps in the process still have room for improvement? Where were we unclear in our work? And, I might look down at this safer planning step down at the bottom and see that, we're at 18% for this step. And so, that's pretty far from our goal. You can also hopefully see there's a little question mark over that Post-it note. So our team wasn't really clear actually on what we were doing for this step, and everyone kind of did something a little different. So this might be a place where we want to focus our work for the next 90 days. So we would go back to the spreadsheet, go down to primary driver 4. Okay, that's our safer planning. And then we'll look at our changes and say, which of these changes are most important for our team to test around safer planning? And you might look at your data or have a conversation and say, okay, we do a really good job at offering a referral to the DB organization. But, after hearing Allison and Lee and Kathy talk, we're realizing we really don't focus on the survivors' priorities. And so this change on using the conversation prompts and listening strategies is somewhere where we really need to focus. And, we definitely want to use the PDSA on using those conversation prompts. So, that's going to be the PDSA we run. Maybe Z is going to be responsible for this ramp of PDSAs. And, I encourage you to think about when you're, putting the person responsible, think about your whole team. This can be a home visitor that's really excited about this change. It doesn't have to be a team lead or supervisor that's responsible. And then we'll think about when we're going to test this. So maybe we're going to start testing in July. And you can go and actually, I can't see it because can't see the whole spreadsheet, but this is each week in the month, and you can actually go and shade when you're going to work on it. So let's say we're going to, work on this, July, and then the first 2 weeks in August is what we're thinking. So we're going to go ahead and shade those cells. In our process map, maybe we also talked about that we're all sort of using a different process for following up with survivors. And some home visitors aren't even really doing that as part of their work. So this change on, creating guidelines and protocols might be something that piqued our interest. And maybe you looked at the playbook and you see that there's a registry tool, PDSA in there. And so maybe you're gonna try that. Allison is going to be responsible for that, and maybe we'll start this in August, right? A few weeks after we start our conversation starter tips. So you're going to go and do this for each of the drivers, have these conversations, look at the gold standard PDSAs, look at your data, and see where you want to focus. And once you complete the spreadsheet, you'll have a sort of visual map of where you're going, who's doing what, and when you're doing it to help you know, if this plan is doable. So we are going to go into breakouts. You guys see the slides again or no?
Still the spreadsheet.
So spreadsheet, all right. I don't actually know if we need to see the slides, but Anna, I think you're gonna put us all into breakouts again, unless folks have any questions.
Correct.
I would, if I may add, Tricia, I know there's a couple teams who only have one person on the call today. So we encourage you that if you are on your own, that take a look at where your team is and how you might consider running your next team meeting when your team is able to be all together. So perhaps it doesn't take you the whole half hour, but do take some time to think about everything you've learned. How might you share that back with a team and what that might be for planning. So there is a way to use that. And then just making sure, is everybody clear on what's occurring over the next 30 minutes? I apologize. I don't have a horse. That's my dog.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be worth just kind of going over it one more time.
So exactly what Tricia just brought up, your 30, 60, 90-day action plan, it's on the chat box. Pull that up. And you are dividing and conquering and thinking and brainstorming what tests you're going to run next and how you're going to approach the driver diagram.
Yeah, so think about what drivers you want to focus on over the next 90 days. And then within those drivers, what are the changes that are really going to move your team forward?
And use your pre-work.
So if we have a meeting already scheduled this week to do this, do we need to do this now on here? Because I'm finding it for my team that when we're virtual like this, I don't get the impact or the conversation that I need for some of this stuff. So we have a meeting Thursday morning in person to do this work.
You might consider some individual reflection time of what has stuck for you and where you have questions for the faculty as well. And what you heard from your colleagues, if you were able to be in the storyboard session with colleagues shared. I think there's power in the individual reflection so that when you come together on Thursday, people are clear on the things that interest them and the things that will help them move forward. So you can arrive to Thursday with action. That would be my recommendation.
It also might be good to, maybe try it with one driver and you can come back. We're going to do a little bit of peer sharing. If you have questions, we'll be here to answer them so that you're, ready to go for your team meeting on Thursday.
We know that you're not going to get through everything, as Tricia said.
No, I know I'm not going to get through everything. The problem, anyway, okay.
And then we're going to come back together after the team time to wrap up the call. So I'm going to, we're going to stay here. And the way that you'll ask for help is by, once you go to your breakout groups, you can hit the help button and we can send faculty and our team to come answer questions as well. So Anna, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put everyone in their groups and we'll give you a halfway point, 5 minute and 1 minute warning. And if you need us, call for us. We'll come support you. And your state teams will come too.
Right, everyone should be back now.
We got a cut off at a juicy point. I just want to say it was really like, Lindsay, if you're there, I'm sorry. We really got cut off at a juicy point.
Well, I'm glad you're having a juicy conversation. I'm sorry that you got cut off. I feel like that always happens with breakouts. But we hope you all had good conversations or the start of good conversations in your planning for the next 90 days. We'd love to hear from a few teams, how it went, what conversations you had, where you might focus next. To kick us off, I think, Anna, you're going to pull up a Menti. You guys can let us know which drivers you're thinking about for the next 90 days. And then, again, I'd love to hear from one or two people to share what their team is thinking. All right, so you guys should be able to go to menti.com and put in the code 81010360. And again, let us know which drivers your team talked about testing in over the next 90 days. So you should see each of the 4 drivers there and click which ones you're going to work on. Is everyone able to get to the Menti? Z has also put the link down there in the chat. I love these little bubbles. Is this new?
I was just about to say, what's happening?
I'm very confused. All right, I'm starting to see them come in. Looks like we have some spread across all the drivers.
It almost looks like they're nestling together and finding homes visually, isn't it?
It is a very funny graphic. All right, well, not surprisingly, it seems like many of you are focused on the two drivers that we really focused most on in this learning session. Driver 3 on universal education and driver 4 on safer planning. We know that you started on drivers 1 and 2 and really moving to this next part of the work, which is wonderful. So again, anyone willing to share what you guys talked about and what you think you might test in the drivers that you want to focus on? Just go and take yourself off mute. Love to hear from at least one team before we have to wrap up.
Our team talked about language and maybe staff training on the use of language. So when you say intimate partner violence, it sounds a little bit different than saying relationship issues or relationship concerns, relationship trouble. So just kind of the use of language and unstigmatizing the instead of using domestic violence, intimate partner violence, people are like, no, not. So we really gathered from the presentation earlier that like utilizing language, you probably get a lot more by using the universal education and then just having a casual conversation. So
great. And that really ties to actually drivers 1 and 3, right? You're doing the staff training, but then also using it with families and having those conversations, which is wonderful. All right, anybody else want to share what they're going to work on in the last minute? Or any questions that you guys have or confusion?
I was excited to hear from Kathy and the conversation prompts. So I was doing a little brainstorming and thinking about how in the Healthy Families Parent Survey process, there's conversation prompts related to IPV. And I was thinking like it could be really useful to intentionally discover and name what they are and see how that later informs the universal education we offer. So it feels like 2 different kinds of PDSAs maybe.
Great, and you know, again, really role playing those and making them your own and making them feel comfortable will be important too. They're really just those conversation starters, and making it your own is important in that testing. So great that you have a starting point. All right, well, as I said, you know, we're really hoping that this is, you know, the start of your plan and that you really use this throughout your work over the next 90 days. So, you know, bring it up in your team meetings and, you know, update it as you test new things or you know, you make some progress on your work. So please do, you know, use this again as a tool for help managing your work. And I will turn it over to Z to wrap us up.
Thank you, everyone. Anna is going to put a link to the eval, and we're going to do something like we did last time, and we're going to take some protected time during this call to wrap up together, but we want to leave you with a call to action. We hope you were just as inspired as we are by Kathy's story, and we know we don't typically say we can see into the future, but we can with confidence say that all of the PDSAs that you're running and all the work that you're doing are going to allow you to get to the own version of Kathy's story that each of you will have in about a year. And part of that is it's really testing small. So we are going to encourage you to please consider role playing, the safer planning starter tips in the conversations, as well as the universal education. And let you know that in our next action period call, which happens July 8th, that's how we're going to start the call, to hear from every single team. So we don't like giving surprises. So we'll say it right now. We're literally going to go round robin and hope to hear from every single team. So please give it a shot, test it, try it, bring questions, send your questions in advance so the faculty can come ready too. We've been taking notes on some things that you're thinking about, like language and translations and interpreters. And so we'll bring that as well, make sure we have answers to those for you. So that's how we're going to start. Notice that we're saying role played, or perhaps your team is ready to try it with a family. Please do. Continue to build your ramps, and that's how we're going to start. And then just a friendly reminder to please submit your 30, 60, 90-day action plans to both your state CQI leads as well as to the HV coin. You're going to consistently see these tools being referenced throughout the action period. Your state team leads will bring it up in your conversations, and we will continue to come back to them as an anchor of how to move your work forward. I know that we usually tell you this every time, but know that any questions you have, that you can reach out to us at our HV Coin general email, but also for any project structure, anything, you can reach out to Mary, and she would be more than happy to support you. And then amazing job last time. We were the second group with the highest number of responses to our evaluation. And those evaluations is what helps us bring information to you. So there's a bucket in there that says, what do you want more of? Please feel free to put your questions, what you want more from the faculty, from us. It's not just about logistics and tech, although we want to hear about that too. So I'm going to turn on some music, and I'd hope that you join me in taking a solid 3 to 4 minutes of your time during the call to complete the evaluation, so that we have, let me see how many of you are here, 32 responses by the time of today's call. So I'm going to end the show, ask Anna to please put the link again in case anybody had to relog out and back in. And I'm just going to ask everybody to take a moment and answer that. And while you do that, I'll play some music for us. Well, it should only take about 3 to 4 minutes. And as you complete that, we also welcome you to type in any last questions, reflections as we close out.